For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. Governor Dayton said he feels pretty good and has gotten a clean pathology report since his surgery to remove prostate cancer last week. In his first public appearance since the surgery, Governor Dayton today signed a bill that would provide $1.7 million in recovery relief to the city of Madelia after a fire that devastated the downtown last year. The bill also provides $5 million to replace wetlands impacted by local road construction projects.
Fortunately, they have two very experienced and very effective legislators, Senator Rosen and Representative Cornish, who went to bat for them from the very beginning of this legislative session, and were successful in introducing into this legislation a measure that will benefit Madelia and help it continue the really important progress that's made.
This is what Minnesota is all about. This is when we come together and we do the right thing in an emergency. And the wetland replacement bill was an emergency, along with Madelia. And I am very honored to be able to serve that community.
The business owners came up here today partially to thank us graciously, but we really need to thank them because the way they pulled together, like Senator Rosen said, they took a huge risk on basically a wing and a prayer and a promise from a couple of politicians, which you know how they turn out sometimes. And in this case, we were so glad to make it come to fruition. But the risk that they took with the huge amount of capital that they invested with just a hope of getting some of the investment back, not even all of it. And we still have some work to do on the sales tax exemption for construction materials. Got a major portion done today, but and then I want to thank the governor. Not every bill gets a signing, especially one as nice as this. He was so gracious to come in and to give us this opportunity today for all of us to express our feelings. And thank you to the businessmen and women that came from Madelia and worked so hard to bring this about, and to the senators, like Senator Rosen said, to let us attach this to their bill.
As most of you probably know, we had a devastating fire on February 3rd, 2016 that took out 8 of our buildings downtown. And there was never a doubt on whether those buildings were going to get replaced. In a town of 2,300, a disaster like that could have been devastating. It could have been the end of our town. But the property owners stood up the next day and decided they were going to rebuild. And they did it without any promises or any guarantees of any type. We went to our legislators, and they stood up to the challenge, and they did what needed to be done, and they helped us, and that's why we're here today.
We brought the bill forward. It was simply for the Wetland Replacement Act that was not accomplished last year, and that has been one of Minnesota's commitments to the counties and cities throughout the state to get that done. But working with the governor, and the governor has said time and again, getting our work done down here at the speed of commerce. Once again, we can show in Minnesota that we can get that done working together.
Following the bill signing, the governor took questions from the press. A reporter asked how he's feeling.
I feel pretty good. You know, it's aftermath of surgery. It's not enjoyable, but the important news is I got an absolutely clean pathology report. There's no evidence of any spread of the cancer beyond the prostate, which was entirely removed. So that's the part that really matters for the long run. And the rest of it is just waiting, taking one day at a time.
Are you feeling like you're making progress on your recovery?
Yeah, you know, yes I am. Yeah, I went down there again yesterday and had my assisting devices removed, and it was a great comfort and relief. And as I've said before, there are no brain cells in my prostate, so I haven't noticed any lapse of, well, my usual lapses of judgment, but my staff can attest to that. But I feel fit, and I don't take any pain medication except for a Tylenol once or twice a day, and that's it. So I feel clear-headed and up to speed and ready to carry on with the legislature over these next 2.5 months.
Did your doctor give you any guidance about limiting your workload in this first few weeks post-surgery, or did he tell you to just get right back into it?
He told me I should double down and work harder. He said the typical disability for this is four weeks, so we agreed that we'd truncate that. He's amazing His name is Dr. Igor Frank. He was born in Siberia. His grandfather and grandmother were deported from Estonia to Siberia in his cattle car and dumped into the winter desert there in the middle of winter, told, go build yourself a home and find food if you can. And his grandfather was a doctor. And so they kept, when they realized this, they decided they wanted to keep him alive. So he survived 13 years in the gulag from 1942 to 1955. And then I don't know exactly the sequence, but then his family were sent to Massachusetts, where he got his college undergraduate and medical degree, and then came to Mayo, and now he's my savior. Pretty incredible story. And he played ice hockey, so we talked ice hockey the whole time. Well, I wasn't talking during the surgery, but yesterday.
Other questions?
Governor, when can we expect to see a supplemental budget from you?
Next week, yes. I'd really prefer to see the legislators' budget targets, which I'm told by both the leaders are forthcoming sometime next week. So, but by the end of next week, I'll have mine ready to go. We're just getting the repricing from revenue and MMB today, so that'll be one of our weekend pleasures. Plow through those.
Governor, a lot of drama in the legislature over real ID. You had expressed your preference on this issue, I believe, last week. The bill failed in the Senate. A lot of Minnesotans are really anxious to get this, but there's also this issue of immigrant driver's licenses. What are your thoughts on where things stand right now and what the next step lawmakers should do is?
Well, we need to get a real ID bill, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to do so, given that everybody in the legislature recognizes that necessity. You know, whether it should be a bill just about the real ID or whether it should also provide the authority for the Department of Public Safety to begin rulemaking to allow another lesser driver's license for those who don't want to go through the rigors of real ID, and also those who wouldn't qualify under those terms, which would include people who are here undocumented. I prefer that approach. The House is adamantly opposed and put it in the prohibition in statute. The Senate has some language now that so I think it's really a question of what the House and the Senate can work out in conference committee, and that's the legislative process. It's their job to produce a bill that I can sign.
Are you saying that you wouldn't agree to two-track unless there is an undocumented immigrant provision along with that?
No, I'm saying it's an imperative to get a bill, and one that. So what form it takes is really where the legislature is hung up right now, and that's not surprising in the legislative process. But they're going to have to work out. There are obviously very different points of view. If again, from my point of view, if people would be willing to allow people many of whom are driving on our highways already, we're willing to allow them to get the training necessary, get the insurance necessary to be better drivers, safer drivers, for their own sake and for the sake of the people they meet on the highways. I think we'd be a better state for it. But others, and if that were the case, we would have had a bill last year. So this issue's been tied to this, been part of it, because they're both driver's licenses, and it's been this way for a year, and it's very important to get it resolved.
The Speaker says that he wants status quo.
Say what?
The Speaker says that he wants status quo in the bill, and in other words, that the rules would be as they are. He
gets one vote. I understand that's his position. But, in the nature of the legislative process, you've got to be a majority in the House, which there clearly is, and the majority in the Senate, which is not yet forthcoming. Somebody says they want the status quo, that means they don't want the part that others are proposing, which is certainly speaker's prerogative, but it's pretty commonplace for people who have other ideas to want to add to the legislation something that's more reflective of their concerns.
It looks like the reinsurance program to try to prop up the individual market is going to cost more than originally anticipated, maybe double, and that could eat up more of the surplus. Any thoughts on that?
I've had several conversations with Senator Gazelka. I have not heard from either the Senate or the House definitively what they want to use as a funding mechanism. I think it is prohibitively expensive to take it from the general fund. It's very expensive to take it from the Healthcare Access Fund. I favor a kind of small fee for service, what was used to fund MSHA or something along those lines. So it's a self-sustaining pool of funds, because nobody knows what's happening in Washington, including the people in Washington. So nobody knows, how long this is going to last and what form it's going to need to take, and it's going to need the flexibility even next fall to respond to the marketplace as these insurance companies define it. So having a reliable source of money that's not going to drain the general fund is very important. And also, and to get the insurance, and I've been pressing, and I know they've tried it a couple of hearings, the insurance industry needs to come forward and tell us if they get $300 million a year through reinsurance, what effect is that going to have? Are they going to stay in the market then as a result? Are they going to lower their rates and keep them where they are? Raise them for whatever percent, and if so, give us a ballpark. We need to know what we're getting for this very significant commitment of public funds.
Governor, you perhaps saw the article in Wall Street Journal and some of the other publications about the president's daughter and her husband renting a townhouse in D.C. or house in D.C. From there's a connection to the Chilean company that is tied into backing the Twin Metals project. Any thoughts on that, sir?
Well, if nothing changes from the decisions that the Obama administration made on those matters, then I'll believe it's a coincidence. And if anything does change, I'll believe otherwise. So we'll wait and see.
One, Governor, the Legislative Salary Council voted to raise the salaries to $45,000 this morning. Any comments on that?
Well, I wasn't aware of that number, but that's in the ballpark of what I've thought that it ought to be approximate to the median family income in Minnesota, which is about $52,000. So good, and hopefully the legislature will provide the funding necessary, and we can get this off of the backs of legislators who make a real commitment of time and finances in order to serve, and generally serve Minnesota very well. So I'm glad they've taken that step.
Do you know the next time you'll be at Mayo for a checkup, or?
Is that?
The next time that you'll visit Mayo for a checkup?
Right from here.
Okay.
What's that?
You're going back to Mayo now, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get a frequent flyer tab. And my Starbucks card is up there.
All good?
Okay?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.